Beautiful creatures of this beautiful planet. It is League Unlocked. That is Mark. My name is Eric. We are here. We're recapping the final Worlds qualification for 2020. The last team playing for that spot. Team number 22 comes down to the finals of the regional gauntlet. And Mark, we know how it works. When you get to the gauntlet, Gen.G, Samsung, doesn't matter what organization they are, they get the buff, and they took it through this year. It's another spicy year because T1, they're not going to Worlds, Mark. They're not going.
It's unfortunate we find out in 2020, the buff, the Samsung Gen.G big-time Gauntlet Galaxy buff comes through, and it is stronger than the best of 5 buff that T1 was hoping was going to come into their favor here. Look, it has been a wild year that we started with a run of T1 defeating Gen.G for a seventh consecutive time. Now, that ain't the case, baby. It's Gen.G going to Worlds.
And, you know, maybe the actual theory is a Gauntlet debuff when it comes to T1, because the only other time they were hanging out in there is 2018 when they fell to Gen.G in 5 games, and then 2014 when they didn't qualify for Worlds at all. It was an off year, so this is a combination of a debuff for T1 and the big buff for Gen.G, and that's what you got on the Rift. But the last series of the season, we got to dive a little deep into it. And game 1, 3 games, but T1 had a chance in almost all these games. They shouldn't have had a chance in game 1 because they were getting absolutely smacked around early, but then both squads started throwing the game back and forth.
Yeah, well, let's even start before the game. We can look at the draft immediately, and that's going to be a
Mark
theme
loved the
for
drafts this morning. I absolutely
loved
them.
Boy, this has been a theme for the series and a theme for watching the T1 organization, unfortunately, this summer, has been the issue with the drafts. And this is something that we saw in spring. We saw in certain instances some of these questionable reads on the meta or choices of the draft, and we thought, okay, you know what? Wonky, but, iron itself out. Unfortunately, we saw those problems more in summer, and then almost as if they knew that this was the end of the year, the climax, the big old shebang, this was it, and the worst drafts possible coming through.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest one that I want to talk about is the Renekton in 2 out of the 3 games, and Kana was your best player throughout all of summer. I don't think there's any doubt about that. He was the most consistent and the best player overall for them throughout summer. He didn't get subbed out at all because you couldn't, because he was an all-pro top laner. Why is he in a Renekton Volibear matchup 2 out of 3 games? Why?
And again, that's the crazy thing that we're already talking about, is that the expectations for someone like Kana normally is just, okay, this is your young top lane prodigy. Just, build up from here, whatever positives you take, and then you deal with the negatives. But given the performances, the level of play, the competency that we saw from Kana and this T1 roster, an all-pro status, like you said, that is the level of play that we were getting from him. The expectation has to be that you're able to keep up and perform at this level. And in summer, we didn't get the same level of play and consistency from Kana. And so that is going to be something you absolutely need to look at next year as a spot of growth for T1. But in this series, his performance was lacking, and especially lacking throwing him on the fossil pick of Renekton, which was not strong whatsoever in this series.
Yeah, and even in game 2, you give him the Jace. Okay, that's fine. I'm much happier to see him on that than the Renekton. And this is the game where it was actually going great for T1. They had a 3,000 gold lead at 15 minutes. They look fully in control. And then as soon as skirmishes and team fights started happening, you quickly realized, okay, there's definitely 3 rookies on this roster, because they weren't even really team fights. It was just as soon as Gen.G engages, T1 explodes around the map, and there's just 5 members running away. They get picked off one by one.
And they had, the single brain type of thought process sometimes of, okay, well, this is what we're doing. And it's like, but guys, there's other options. You can, you can take it and leave. You don't need to have this fight. You can let your support die because it's the support. It's not that big of a loss, as opposed to giving over a full ace and then maybe the Baron. These type of situations, of course, these are the mistakes that you were seeing on the day, and Gen.G was more than happy to punish these ones.
You even had just both sides of the coin where Faker much like the Africa series, has this highlight-worthy play on the Silas, starts in a 1v3, ends up being an ace for T1. Okay, great, they're back in the game, and then they're starting a Baron 4v5, but they just completely tunnel on it. Faker says, boys, I'll TP in, let's go. And gets blown up immediately. He doesn't even have a stopwatch.
And even before he TPs in, Ellen's at like a quarter of his health from the Baron doing the damage. And it's like, guys, just leave the Baron. It's not going to be in a position that Gen.G is able to just step in right away and force that pressure. You could have just left it and said, okay, you know what, that attempt, it didn't work out. And you were still in a relatively position of strength without giving up too much to Gen.G. Man, the execution was not there from T1, and the decision-making was extremely questionable in the games. And again, this is all after being set off the back foot in the first place by being completely outdrafted.
But with those two games, T1 was in the driver's seat for the early game in game one. Gen.G had some bad throws, in game one, and they were in the driver's seat for game two. So it could be 1-1, even 2-0, maybe. I mean, a lot would have to go right for T1. Then they go into the third game, and you thought, okay, Teddy, Cuz, someone's subbing in, right? But they wrote it out with the same roster for that third game. You get Renekton versus the Volley Bear again, and he gets pumped. And by the way, in game three, there were 480 carry bans thrown at Ruler, and then he just says, okay, 200 years. He's still there.
Yeah, and we can talk about this problem later as well, but even looked in the first game with T1, you had this type of similar situation as far as many marksmen being banned out, and T1's idea was to go with the Aphelios into a composition that included an Azir, of course, how is the Aphelios supposed to fight into that?
Against the best Azir in the LCK.
Right. And then, of course, you picked the Aphelios with the Senna open on the other side. Of course, the answer with that, different story in this game that you had, obviously, in the game three. But, man, the questions as far as banning out these ADCs, and look, that's not the question. We saw that in the LCS, used to good measure by TSM, pushing tactical onto something more so like the Jhin in these important games when you had taken the comfort, taken the premier pick in things like the Senna. T1 says, no, we want the worst option in Aphelios. Why?
Yeah, there was a lot of questionable drafting that was going on, but in the end, okay, yeah, maybe you're at a handicap or a deficit, but there were still opportunities for T1 to at least be in this series. They didn't end up taking a game. We didn't see Teddy. We didn't see Cuz. All the roster shuffling that went around this team, it's just insane to think of how good they were in the spring split, that an organization as storied as T1 is not going to Worlds, and this is not a case of you can't complain about the format. You can't say, oh, the spring split should have mattered more to carry them over. They had ample opportunity. They had to beat Africa a couple of times and show up. I think if they beat Africa and just make a deep playoff run, they have enough points. So there's nothing to complain about from the T1 side.
And the problem is, even when you look back at that playoff series and you look at the way that they were drafting, you look at the way that they were playing, the reads on the meta, this is a meta that shouldn't be an issue for T1 and how they want to play. You've got plenty of options for carry top laners for someone like Kana to take advantage of.
Sure.
The mid lane pool is absolutely busted for someone like Faker to pick and choose and play.
Well, he has to play the games for that, so.
Yeah, and then even down bot side, you've got plenty of options, and it doesn't matter. I don't care who you're playing, Teddy, Gumiasi, it doesn't matter. They're both extremely skilled and well enough to give you an advantage here. It didn't matter. None of these things came through for T1. None of the execution was there for T1. And as you said, I've hated, and we've talked about these drafts, and we can nitpick about them all the time. But at the end of the day, T1 was still in a lot of these games. They were still in a lot of these decisions, and they chose poorly. And that is really, to me, more than anything, why they ended up the losers on the day.
The bottom line, and we haven't given them enough credit, if you're a fan of the LCK, you're happy that Gen.G is going, because they have clearly looked like the better team throughout all of summer. Yeah, they had some suspect moments in this series, but overall, no question, they looked better. They're performing well. Really, Rascal did step up. I know he had the favorable matchup, but you would think him versus Kana was a mismatch, but Rascal showed up on the day.
Look, we asked Connor to step up against Keen, and I think that was a mixed result in that series of him stepping up a little bit and still also being dished out on the losing end of that matchup. But when you looked at the series against Rascal, you had to be feeling positive. This was one where, man, they even flexed Keen into Faker to try and get that type of advantage and things like that. This was not what you were seeing in this matchup against Kana with Rascal. It was the full expectation. Yeah, Rascal has been around, and he's certainly not a bad top laner. Kana should have found a way to create an advantage in that top side. And even worse for T1, it was a disadvantage so many times. And I think, yes, part of that is being stuck on that fossil. And what are you going to do? But still, the performance was not there.
T1 joins Cloud9, IG, and FPX in Group E for the World Championship, where they will not be playing at 2020 Worlds. Now the question going forward for T1 is, okay, so you had a great spring. You have all these young players that are looking like they absolutely have potential, living up to the hype. So what is this roster going to look like in 2021? Because the players are all signed through next year, everybody, save for Teddy and Closer, who are signed through 2022. You've only got Moment and Comet, the two assistant coaches whose contract will be up. A lot of people are going to be mad at Coach Kim for all of this drafting. Gumiyashi and Teddy are both deserve starting spots in the LCK. The question, do you want to stay with an organization like T1? Or if you're Gumiyashi, do you want to go on a lower tier LCK team but be a starter? There's so many questions to look at this team now.
Yeah, and it's one of those ones where it's not quite doom and gloom questions, of course, because there still has been so many positives and potential shown from this team.
Oh.
And anytime you're keeping Faker in the organization, of course, people are still going to be excited. But yeah, there are questions when you look at this team, and it's not just the questions that you would be thinking of. Man, how much more can Kana become, a solid option in that top side? All these other type of questions you might have, those aren't the immediate ones that need to be asked. As you said, making a choice on your ADC, that's a big one for me. As far as Teddy and Gumiyashi, you got to pick one or the other, because as you said, they are both clearly LCK starting caliber, and I would say probably better than in the top half of the LCK. Of the ADCs. That's how good they are. So I think you got to make a choice.
Unless Gumiyashi's comfortable a splitting time or kind of staying and developing with an organization like T1 as opposed to playing on, I don't know, Hotwell Life if Viper leaves or one of the bottom tier teams in the LCK.
Right, but then even at that point, I think you got to have some of these discussions, right, about what you want to do with the bot lane as well, because yeah, you got effort signed for another year. But his performance was extremely questionable, and yes, as much as we praise effort and for being extremely vocal despite being so young,
not a good playoff run. Not a good
playoff run, and one of those ones that we question the bot lane's performance. And Teddy was the one subbed out, but we see a lot of those issues continue, and effort is the one that stays in, of course. So that's where the questions can start to come in, and we can maybe examine that. And as well, the one option, and I don't think it's nothing really against the players on T1. But man, what a pick it could be if you could add Tarzan to this roster in the offseason. That could be the real king prize.
I think that is the big move that T1 should be looking to make. As great as the development was for Elam, the highs that Cuz did have, if you have the opportunity where you can get Tarzan, and we've heard there's been rumors that he wanted to sign with an LPL team, but he just basically ran out of time with all of the mess around COVID and trying to get on a squad, so he wasn't there for summer. But yeah, if you can get that opportunity, he's still probably one of the biggest free agents available. Kana, there's no question. You're keeping him, developing him around. Faker owns part of the team. He's not going anywhere. He's staying on there. Closer is similar to Gumiyashi. Does he want to start somewhere? Does he want to be in Faker's shadow all the time? Maybe he wants to learn from him. So yeah, Tarzan's great, and something needs to happen with the support, even if it's just Curry being promoted and getting some starts over effort. I can't believe he didn't in summer, to be honest.
Yeah, I think that's certainly one that you could address from the inside. But if you're looking on the outside, I think a name that a lot of people like is something like Lehens. Obviously, an extremely a veteran player that we see in the LCK, as well as someone that could bring the playmaking style that you think that T1 would like to add to this team. The one thing I want to add with the heavy criticism of the draft and everything that happened is, yes, it does at the end of the day got to come down to Coach Kim, and that's got to be the one who answers for obviously the mistakes and things like that. But you better believe that it's not just 100% Coach Kim making these draft errors and decisions. There's a whole staff involved in making these things, and this is where you look at what happened over the years, the exodus from T1. Of course, we always start and talk about Coach Carter leaving the League of Legends side with T1, but even just this past year, you had Zephyr and Coach Akoma leave the organization. You had Zephyr go over to Damwon.
Yeah, how's Zephyr doing? Remember how criticized he got for his drafting?
Exactly, and that's where we're at the question now. And so you need to be really aware and realize that, yes, these drafts, it's not just the head coach saying, this is it, this is it, this is it. You got input from the players. You got input from the additional coaching staff as well on what they're doing. So there obviously is other people responsible for these errors in the draft. But you do need to understand that when we're talking about it, and when we're asking for responsibility to be taken, that's kind of the point of head coach, right? There needs to be someone at the forefront of this spear. And unfortunately for Coach Kim, I think that, you know what, even as much as you believe in him and want to give another chance, I don't know if you're going to get that second chance.
Yeah, and I mean, that's the good coaches, they do take the blame, even though if it's not fully theirs to take. That's kind of why you're there, to protect your players and to protect the other coaches. I think he should get another run, but he's hardly with a team more than 1 year. He's gone through IG, Damwon, shuffled through them. And what's great that we didn't touch on, all of the T1 Clid memes throughout spring and even times in summer, in the end, who's going to Worlds?
And as I said, beginning of the year, seven consecutive wins against the Gen.G organization. That's what had been pulled up by T1. Clid, obviously a big part of that. And when you looked at him joining those sides and T1 clowning on them, and then, of course, how well they played against Gen.G, yeah, of course, there were a lot of the memes and people laughing about it and, you know, switching sides. As you said it, Clid, the one with the last laugh, and I got to be thinking as well, CEO Arnold at Gen.G. That is one of these guys that deals with a lot of the jokes and criticism coming through from Joe Marsh at T1 and everything else. But, man, he, as you said, last laugh coming through from the Gen.G side, as they are the ones booking that third spot to Worlds for the LCK.
Yeah, the most important series to have won. But you're right, the future of T1, it's not, oh my God, we have to blow up this entire roster. Like, really, you should be happy. All this youth development, look at all these rookies that they've had that have shown up. Okay, they didn't get it done in the last couple of series, but some of that, you need a full split, a lot of these guys, to be fully implemented into the team.
If I told you everything that was going to go down and all the changes and substitutions type of things for T1 and rolling with, you know, all these rookies at different points in times in different positions, I think a lot of people would say, yeah, missing out on Worlds at the last spot, that's not that bad of a year. And of course, looking at it as next year and continuing that growth. And that's going to be the big thing, obviously, to make this work, to make this value, to make this loss, to make this missing out on Worlds have that value, is going to be coming back stronger next year. That's going to be the expectation, and that should be the demand from the T1 fan base.
Yeah, Kana, absolutely stick with them. The mid lane, they have too many good options with Faker and Closer. Same with AD carry. It's support and jungle that you got to be looking to, I think, if you're T1 in 2021. And it depends who's available in free agency. So with Gen.G locking that final spot, team number 22, it's time, Mark. We got to take a look at now all 22, not 24, teams that are qualified for the World Championship. And when you break them up into their pools, because remember, we still have to go through the entire play-in stage. But Pool 1, Top Esports, G2, Damwon, TSM. One of these is not like the other, Mark.
Yeah, I can understand. I can take the hint. That's TSM. You're doing the best you can, but oh boy, you're feeling a little bit.
You don't have to go against those other three. That's a big win.
Yeah. Look, you take the embarrassment for not being up to that quality level as the other teams. You'll take that any day, as long as that means that you don't have to be put in the same group as them.
Yeah, and for Pool 2, it gets worse for NA because there isn't anyone. We don't have a Pool 2 seed because LPL gets JDG and Suning alongside Fnatic and DRX. And you know what? Again, I think it's fair that the LPL gets 2 Pool 2s. They've dominated the last 2 Worlds.
Yeah, it's absolutely fair. But one of the great things here is Suning, and this is a team that we talked about, and we asked a lot of times. The one thing we were waiting for was the big signature victory. Well, I sure as hell think they added that through their making it through the gauntlet victory. But when you do look at Suning and you think about them as a second seed, yeah, a lot of people might be sleeping on them as a number 2 seed. You should not be, because I tell you what, the level of play that they show and the way and the power that they have, yeah, you put them in any other region, number 2 is as low as you might find a team like Suning.
Yeah, and when you get to Pool 3, that is when the actual second seed from the LCS shows up, where you've got...
Hey, we're here.
We're here. Rogue, Gen.G, FlyQuest, and Machi eSports. It seems, after what Gen.G just did to T1, it seems rough having them.
What are they doing there? What?
Doesn't quite seem fair to have them there. Better than play-ins, though.
That feels like someone took Gen.G's world train ticket and smudged the 2 into a 3 so they could slip down into that spot.
It's like when you pay for a first class ticket and then you're in coach and you're like, how did I get here? I thought I paid for this.
Look, a lot of people slept on them back at the 2016 World Championship as far as where they were placed in their group, and ask TSM fans how that worked out for them there. So this is a Gen.G once again poised to come through and be the upset, as we do not deserve to be a 3rd seed, and we're going to prove that we are a lot better than that.
I'm just happy to see BDD back at Worlds. It's been 3 years. 3 years since BDD's been there. It seems crazy.
Look, and that's the awesome thing, right? We're getting so many players returning back to Worlds. You get Bjergsen coming back. You got Power of Evil coming back. You got Ignar coming back. And, of course, we're bringing back BDD for a little bit of that Worlds.
2017 all over again for all 3 of those guys. The play-in seeds, play-in Pool 1, LGD, Mad Lions, Team Liquid, and PSG from the LMS. Peanut in the play-in stage. That should be fun.
Hey, man, it's going to be a wild time, these play-ins, as we talked about earlier in the past couple of weeks, talking and looking at the scheduling and how the format will work for this new play-ins with obviously 22 as opposed to 24 teams. It's going to be pretty hectic. And I tell you what, looking at these teams and you're thinking about adding in, of course, LGD, you're adding in Mad Lions. Oh boy, it's getting a little bit spicy. And you add in a Team Liquid, which I know people are going to be like, NA, I don't care. 3rd NA, I don't care. I'm telling you why you should care. This is a Team Liquid with 4 damn veterans on this roster. Not just 4 veterans. You're talking about Broxa. You're talking about Jensen. You're talking about Core JJ. And you're talking about world champion Impact in the top lane. So you've got absolute Roxas veterans. And then NA's Hope Tactical, the rookie coming through, picking up that experience. This is going to be a wild play-ins, and it's going to be the exact explosive start that people want to this Worlds.
Yeah, and obviously the three of the 4 Pool 1s, everyone but the LMS should be big favorites, but the other one everyone's talking about is Unicorns of Love to kind of be that, not even dark horse, but one of the favorites for that final spot in the main stage.
When you look at the Unicorns of Love, they're not just going to be happy with when you look at the play-ins and you think about, okay, steal a victory here, that screws over this team. Oh man, we need to get a win here. Nah, Unicorns of Love ain't playing just for that. They're playing to get through the play-ins. That's the goal. It is going to be a real thrill watching them and what they can bring to the table and what uniqueness they're going to bring to the table here at Worlds.
22 teams, all qualified. We'll give you the full preview of it all, but that's all the time today for League Unlocked. My name's Eric, here with Mark. Thanks for hanging out with us as always, guys. We'll catch you guys and gals on the flippity flop.